The man in the orange vest didn't blink. He stood in my doorway, glanced once at the thermostat glowing a steady 72, and said, "Ma'am, grab your purse and step outside. Don't touch the thermostat." I didn't move at first. It was one of those drizzly Washington mornings that makes the air feel like wool. My kettle had just clicked off. The house smelled like buttered toast and cedar. Outside, the maple across the street hung heavy with rain. Inside, the thermostat glowed politely, the number so calm it felt disrespectful to panic. "Now please," the man said, softer this time. "Don't touch anything, purse, keys, phone, that's all." Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the way his eyes kept cutting to the hallway where the HVAC brain lives behind a thin white door. I took my purse from the hook by the front closet, the one my husband installed 10 years ago, and swore would outlast both of us. I slid my phone into the purse and followed the man onto the porch. He kept the door half open like the house might lunge if we gave it the chance. The maple shook. A gull screamed toward the bay. Somewhere, a freight train sighed. He held his tablet like a shield, thumb hovering over the camera icon. "Start with your name," I said, because names make strangers smaller. "Caleb," he said, tapping the badge clipped to his vest. "Caleb Ortiz. I'm with the cable company. You put in a trouble ticket about a signal drop." "I did," I said, finding my breath. "The TV was jittery last night." "You're Nora Whitaker," he said, like he'd met 100 front doors this week and any of them could have been mine. "You mind if I ask who configured your network gear and your smart devices?" "My stepson," I said. "Ethan. He moved back in last fall and set everything up during the holidays. The router in the closet, the cameras, the thermostat. He said he'd make it easy on me." I smiled without meaning to, and it is, mostly. Caleb's gaze went through the slice of living room visible from the porch. He was listening for something I couldn't hear. "I'll need to take a couple photographs from the doorway of the living room and the hall closet where your HVAC control lives. I don't want to touch anything yet. Okay?" "Is there a gas leak?" I asked. "Because gas is the only invisible thing houses are allowed to make." He shook his head once. "Not what I think. I saw an unusual line spliced off your main Cokes run. Gray jacket, not ours. Also looks like a non-manufacturer control line, piggybacking the thermostat faceplate. It could be nothing. It could be something. I'm not going to speculate on your porch." Rain ticked on the awning like slow applause. I nodded. He angled himself sideways, one boot inside, one boot out, and lifted his tablet. He took a photo of the entertainment console, the back of it where cables drop in a neat curtain. He took another of the thermostat in the hall and another of the narrow door where the HVAC brain waits like a sleeping animal. "Caleb," I said, hearing my voice wobble, "what am I not seeing?" He lowered the tablet and looked at me like I was a person and not a problem. "Mrs. Whitaker, that thermostat is the face, not the mind. The mind is in that closet. I'm seeing evidence someone, maybe from inside the home, added a control path that doesn't belong. Sometimes folks do that to automate things. Sometimes folks do that to create conditions." He exhaled. "I don't want you in the house until we know more." "Conditions," I repeated, tasting the word like it might tell me something if I let it sit. Behind him, my toaster ejected 2 slices of bread into an empty kitchen. The tiny sound felt obscene. "Do you have somewhere you can sit for a few minutes?" he asked. "We can walk to the corner coffee shop. I want to talk without that thermostat looking at us." I locked my front door because old habits follow you even when the rules have changed. We walked to the end of my driveway. The lawn reeked clean, the maple dripped. I could feel the house at my back like a living thing. At the coffee shop, Caleb chose the table tucked into the window's elbow where you can see both the door and the reflection of the street in the glass. He didn't sit with his back to anything if he could help it. He ordered coffee and didn't touch it. I ordered nothing and gripped the paper napkin like a rope. He opened his tablet and sketched with his finger. "Here's your living room," he said, and drew a rectangle. "Here's the console. Here's the hallway thermostat. Here's the closet with the control board." He drew a thin line that shouldn't have existed. "This isn't factory. It could be an aftermarket add-on. It could be a purpose-built control. It shouldn't be there without a permit." "You think a stranger did this?" I asked. I wanted the answer to be a stranger, a faceless thing I could lock out. I think whoever did it had time and access, he said, which either means they were hired and careless enough not to pull permits, or they live in the house. I know the shape my face made then because I could feel it. That face you make when your organs drop and your body pretends it's an elevator. Is Ethan, I started, and couldn't finish. He's good with electronics. He fixed our neighbor's garage door last month with a paper clip and a prayer. He called me Mom when he moved back in. He didn't call me Nora again until... I trailed off. I could hear the small click in memory, the exact night he dropped the mom, the first week of March. He was carrying a coil of cable down to the basement and his phone rang and he answered with, "Yeah," the way young men do. When he came back up, there was an edge in him and he called me Nora. I remember thinking it was grief returning in a new coat. Could Paige have done it? I asked, because if you are going to question one of your children, you might as well question both. She moved in after Christmas. She's been sleeping late, but anyone can learn YouTube. Caleb didn't wince. "I don't like to guess," he said. "I like to document. Then I like to call people whose jackets don't say cable." "Police," I said. The word felt too big for my mouth. "We can walk you through it," he said. "But first I need to go back and take proper photos. I won't touch anything. I won't open panels. But I want serials, labels, tie points. If it turns out I'm wrong, I'll be wrong with evidence." He waited for me to agree. I stared at the little coffee shop's bulletin board. Piano lessons, lost cat. A poster for a community garden workday. The world was doing what the world always does, inviting, losing, growing, while mine shifted under my shoes. "Okay," I said, "but I need to tell you something before we go." He put the tablet down, eyes steady. "Tell me." "My husband died 5 years ago," I said. "He was called David, and he loved to fix things with the right tools, not the clever ones. Ethan and Paige are his, not mine by blood, but mine by wedding vows and holidays and flu seasons. They moved out and moved back in like kids do. Paige is getting divorced. Ethan keeps saying he'll find something steady." I took a breath. David left me the house. There's a small policy, savings, the sort of thing that makes a widow comfortable if her life stays small. Caleb listened like you listen to directions on a road you don't want to drive. "I think we should go now," he said finally. "I don't want to give anyone time for second thoughts." We walked back the same way we'd come, past the dripping maple, past the mailbox Ethan had painted the week he moved in. Bright blue, too cheerful for the house. Caleb's boots had that quiet scrape asphalt makes when it's a little wet. He kept his hands free. He glanced at windows, at corners, at reflections in car doors. When I opened the front door with my key, the house felt like it was holding its breath. It looked like the same house. The couch, the throw blanket, the library lamp with the tiny pull chain like a necklace. The thermostat in the hall glowed 72. "We'll be quick," Caleb said. "You stay by the door. If anything feels off, you step out and call my name. Don't go to the thermostat. Don't go near the closet." I nodded. He took out his phone, the kind in a rubber case that looks like it survived a few drops. He photographed the back of the console and the way a gray cable disappeared into the wall with the other cables, but not quite the same way. He photographed the thermostat up close. It looked like every other thermostat on Earth. He photographed the closet door handle, then the space around it, then a gap in the trim where someone had run something thin and pulled the trim back and nailed it like a picture frame. He didn't touch anything until he had a picture of every nothing. Then he touched the closet door with 2 fingers and opened it slow. Inside, the HVAC control panel sat neat and bossy, door closed. Next to it, zip-tied to a strut, was a slim black box with no manufacturer mark. It wasn't big, it wasn't theatrical. It was the exact size of forgettable. Caleb didn't reach for it. He put his phone closer and took a photo of a tiny terminal block, the kind that has screws for lines. He took a photo of a label someone had printed on a label maker and cut down to a sliver. It didn't say anything meaningful, just a number that wasn't a manufacturer's number. He took a photo of the line running from that box to the panel and the line running away from it toward the wall behind the thermostat. "Okay," he breathed. Okay, that's what I thought. What did you think? I asked. Because if this is the moment your world breaks, you want the break to be clean. That someone added a control path that could ask your system to do things it wasn't meant to do, he said, still photographing. I'm not a fire investigator or a building inspector. I'm not going to tell you what those things might be. I'm going to tell you that we have documentation, and documentation is how you get help. He closed the closet door without clicking it, like he didn't want to wake anything. He turned toward the living room, and my stepson walked through the front gate. He didn't come in swinging or shouting. He came in like a person who belongs. Hand on the jam, rain on his hair, smile right where it always was. He looked at Caleb, then at me, then at the thermostat for a fraction too long. Hey, he said lightly, everything good? Just a routine check, Caleb said, his voice professional to the point of dull. Signal issue on the block. We're documenting installation for the network team. Oh, cool, Ethan said with an ease that would have sold to anyone who hadn't felt their house pull itself tight around their ribs. He walked to the console, crouched, and peered at the maze of black behind the screen, like a man admiring the inside of a whale. I routed the Cokes myself, he said proudly. You'd be surprised how easy it is to do it cleaner than the pros. That's so, Caleb said, flat as a countertop. Yeah, Ethan said, standing. He wiped his thumb on his jeans, the way people do when they've handled something they shouldn't and want their hands to look empty. Mom, you should have called me. I could have fixed whatever you were seeing. He'd called me Mom again. The word landed wrong in the hallway. Caleb nodded toward the door. We're done for now, he said to me, making it sound like a courtesy. We'll be in touch. Caleb, Ethan said, sounding friendly and not friendly. What did you say your last name was? I like to keep track of who we work with. Company has it, Caleb said, and we stepped outside together. On the porch, I locked the door because all of us, it seems, need rituals. Caleb walked me back to the coffee shop without touching my elbow, without touching anything. At a red light, he said to the air, he dropped your name when he needed it to work. He said, Mom, I said. He'll call you Nora again when he needs you to feel small, he said quietly. In the coffee shop, he called a number I didn't know and asked for a sergeant I'd never met. He said words like tampering and control path and unauthorized device. He didn't say murder. He didn't say fire. He didn't need to. We drove to the police station in separate cars. I followed his taillights like I was tethered. I'd never been inside Bellingham PD. It smelled like rain gear and floor cleaner, like a hospital that only sees people on their worst day. The sergeant had hands like a regular person and a voice like someone you'd hand keys to. We gave statements. Caleb sent photographs to an email that looked official. The sergeant asked me simple questions and didn't rush when I had to pause and be a person before I could be a witness. Have you felt unwell? Have there been unusual smells? Has anyone been in the house working without you present? I told him about the night the hallway smelled briefly like something sweet and fake, like a childhood candy. I told him about the afternoon I fell asleep sitting up in a chair I never sleep in. I told him I didn't know if those things were just 60-something being 60-something. He said that could be true and something else could also be true. That helped in a way he couldn't have intended. Where will you stay tonight? He asked at the end. Because I don't want you going back to your house until we can send someone with you. I hadn't thought that far, I said. Because thinking that far means accepting the short distance between your living room and a very bad story. Marina Inn is 2 turns from here, he said. They're used to last minute. Go with Mr. Ortiz. Lock the door. Don't answer for anyone. One of us will meet him for a walkthrough in an hour. Caleb and I drove again, past the gray water of the bay, past the boats that look like toothpicks on their sides. At the front desk, the clerk looked like a college student wearing confidence like an oversized coat. Caleb paid in cash. He asked for a room facing the water. For the view, he said, and I knew it was for the exit. In the room, he did a slow lap. He checked the windows like a dad, the chain like a guard, the bathroom like a soldier. He showed me how to share my location from my phone with 2 taps. He wrote his number on the paper notepad because ink feels harder to lose. He asked if I wanted him to stay in the lobby until the officer called. You don't have to, I said. He smiled in this short, tired way. I know. He left. The door clicked. The room did that hotel thing where it smells like clean air and other people's stories. I sat on the edge of the bed and gripped my purse like a seatbelt. I'd always thought I was good in emergencies because I'd once handled a blown tire on I-5 alone, because I'd once hung a cabinet with a cracked bracket and it never fell, because I'd once said words at my husband's funeral that were his, not mine. But emergencies are easier when they're concrete. This one was braided. Fear, love, doubt, the rude little urge to call Ethan and ask what on earth, the equally rude urge to call him what he'd be if I believed he'd done this. The room phone rang. I looked at it like a snake. "Marina Inn," the clerk said brightly when I picked up. "Ma'am, your son is here. Should I send him up?" I hadn't told anyone where I was. I hadn't told anyone I was going to a hotel. A lot of things could be true at once, and only one of them mattered. "No," I said, "please don't. No one is allowed up to my room. If anyone asks if I'm here, please say I checked out. And could you connect me to the police?" The clerk's voice dropped from bright to real. "Yes, ma'am." I texted Caleb 2 words. "He's here." I stood and slipped on my shoes. There's a particular kind of trembling that starts in the backs of your knees and climbs. I put my purse across my chest the way they tell you to in foreign countries. I listened at the door. Footsteps in the carpeted hall sound like rabbits. I cracked the peephole. Ethan stood not at my door but at the far end, near the elevator, talking to his phone with the stare people use when they're pretending not to watch a door. He had on the same jacket he'd worn to the house, black, expensive in a way he couldn't afford. He put his phone in his pocket and leaned against the wall like he had time. He did not look toward the stairwell. People who plan for elevator doors forget about stairs. I slipped the lock, opened the door the smallest possible crack, and scooted into the hallway like a mouse dodging a cat's tail. I walked with the kind of speed that tells anyone watching you don't belong. The stair door sighed. I went down the steps on the balls of my feet like I remembered from being a kid escaping curfew. On the second landing, I paused. Voices at the bottom echoed up, the musical, clipped pattern of police radio. "Nora?" someone called. A woman. "It's Officer Barnes from the front desk call. You can come down." My whole skeleton exhaled. I reached the lobby as the doors opened and 2 officers stepped inside. Officer Barnes looked like she'd take nobody's nonsense. The man with her had the soft eyes of someone who's delivered bad news carefully. "Are you okay?" she asked. "My stepson is here," I said. "He called the front desk. I didn't tell him where I was." "Sit," she said, pointing to a couch. "We'll have a word with him." Ethan didn't fight. He has always been charming in public. He smiled at Officer Barnes and said he was just here to check on his mom because she's been confused lately. Bless her heart. He widened his eyes like surprise when she said he couldn't go upstairs. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Should I call a lawyer?" he asked casually when she asked him to step outside with her. "I don't want to say something wrong." "That's always your right," she said, as if they were discussing bus routes. They walked out together. The lobby went very quiet. The front desk clerk made a shape with her mouth like a sorry that would get her in trouble if she said it out loud. Caleb came 5 minutes later, rain in his eyebrows. He nodded at me and then at the officer, and they spoke in low, quick sentences that sounded like 2 professionals making a plan and a third person trying not to shake. "Mrs. Whitaker," Officer Barnes said when she came back to me, "we've dispatched a unit to your house with Mr. Ortiz to meet our property crime specialist. If there's an unauthorized device attached to your HVAC control, they'll see it and seize it. If it's gone, we'll look for residue. Either way, you don't go back until we say." "And Ethan?" I asked, hearing the smallness of the question, how it sounded like a child asking if the monster had been caught. "We spoke with him," she said. "He chose to leave on his own. That was wise." She paused. "Do you have anyone else who might try to get to you tonight?" "Paige," I said, "my stepdaughter. If Ethan called her." "If she shows, the front desk will call us immediately," she said. "We'll swing by on patrol regardless." After they left, the hotel room felt like a boat in slow storm. I tried to eat the little granola bar in my purse. It tasted like cardboard and the memory of cinnamon. I thought about David and the way he used to say, "Measure twice, cut once," even when we were just making sandwiches. I thought about the morning he'd shown Ethan how to change the oil and how gently he'd said, "If you rush, you spill." I thought about how grief makes good memories heavier because you can't put them anywhere. My phone buzzed. A text from Paige. "Heard you're at Marina Inn. Let me come up. We should talk this out before it gets dramatic." I stared at the words. They weren't mean. They were reasonable. You can get in a lot of trouble in this country by being reasonable at the wrong time. I didn't respond. The phone buzzed again. "You're scaring me by not answering. Please don't make me worried for nothing." Caleb texted then, saving me from the spiral. "We're at your house with officers and a tech. There's a device on the panel we're photographing. Please stay put." I wanted to ask if devices can mean anything good. I wanted to tell him that Paige had texted the address like a warning shot. I wanted to ask if good men always look this tired. He added, "We'll bring you news in person. Lock the door." I slept in my shoes. I woke up once with my heart hitting too hard and realized it wasn't my heart. It was the ventilation fan cycling in the bathroom. I turned it off and sat on the edge of the bed until the room let go of its shadows. Caleb knocked at 10 with Officer Barnes behind him. He had the look of a man who had both good and bad news and would start with order and let me decide which was which. "The device is there," he said. "We recorded model identifiers where they existed. The black unit has no labeling. The property crime specialist secured both. We found a line into your thermostat that isn't manufacturer. We found a second line to a small unit under the stair that looks like a multi-outlet but is not. I'm not going to describe it more than that. You don't need those details in your head." I felt my throat go dry. "Is it dangerous to talk about it?" "It's just not necessary," he said gently. "We also recovered log entries on a phone at the property that appear to document your symptoms and thermostat behavior over time. Those entries reference plans to create the impression of accidental equipment failure. We'll let detectives speak to that with you in the morning." "Whose phone?" I asked, and hated the need in the question. "We can't say yet," Officer Barnes said, "but I will tell you this. When people rush to remove evidence, they usually miss the parts that leave fingerprints. And when people believe they've built the perfect story, they lean toward arrogance. Arrogance helps us. I don't want any of this to help you," I said, surprising myself. "I want none of this to be real." "I know," she said. She had the face of a person who knows a lot of things and never gets to say any of them to herself out loud. I gave another statement the next day, this one longer, with a detective who had a pad of paper and wrote with a fountain pen, like someone who likes to watch ink dry. He asked about money, and I told him what I had and what I didn't. He asked about wills, and I told him how I'd split things to be fair to the people I love and the causes I love. He asked if I had told Ethan or Paige about those specifics. I said no, because my mother taught me not to discuss numbers at the dinner table, as if numbers are the rude ones. He asked about Ethan's job, and I said he had one sometimes. He asked about Paige's divorce, and I said it was ugly in the way divorces get ugly when both people still want to win after there's nothing to win. He asked if either of them had access to my accounts. I said no, and then remembered the night in February when Paige had helped me reset a bank password because the font on the screen was too small and my eyes were too tired. And I added, she had my laptop for an hour while I made soup and watched him underline something in a way that didn't accuse, but didn't forget. In the days that followed, the detectives found that someone had attempted online transfers from my bank on a Tuesday afternoon in March. The kind of amount that falls just under the flagging threshold. The bank had rejected those attempts because of a misentered birth date. I had never known because the bank's email had fallen into a folder I never checked. The one where newsletters go to be ignored. The detective called that luck. I called it my age. They spoke to neighbors. Mrs. Caldwell from across the street said she'd seen Ethan out front late one night in January, crouched by the service panel with his phone light in his mouth because he needed both hands for whatever he was doing. She'd assumed he was doing what young men do, fixing something he didn't break. I sat in my small hotel chair and wondered how many of the world's wrong turns start with someone assuming a man is fixing something instead of breaking it. The district attorney's office decided what to call what they'd seen. Tampering is a word that always felt small to me, like what a child does with a cake. Attempted murder is a word that felt too big until it fit the shape of my breath. There were other words, too. Conspiracy, endangerment, fraud. Words lawyers stack like bricks until a wall looks like a house. Ethan and Paige didn't run. You can't outrun debt, and you can't outrun grief, and they had both. They turned themselves in with a lawyer in a suit Ethan could not have paid for. The lawyer was good at making simple things look complicated, and complicated things look like misunderstandings. The lawyer used the word confused 3 times in a sentence and aimed it at me, soft-voiced, like he was tucking me into bed. My niece, Claire, drove up from Seattle when she heard. A whirlwind of good decisions and a trunk that always has a blanket and a flashlight in it. She sat in the hotel chair I'd been sitting in and told me that she loved me and that she would sit in every courtroom until the last gavel fell. She brought me a different sweater so I could stop being the woman in the red cardigan who had something bad happen to her and be the woman in the blue cardigan who did something about it. There was a bail hearing. Ethan stared at the table. His jaw flexed like he was trying to chew a memory. Paige looked hollow and incandescent, like a person who has slept under stage lights and dreamed of applause that will not come back. The judge asked questions, and the answers lined up. Ties to community, no prior convictions, a list of places they could not go, and people they could not call. Me, Caleb. The front desk clerk at the Marina Inn for reasons the judge didn't need, but I appreciate it anyway. Months are strange when you're waiting for a thing you don't want. They fill themselves with small errands that feel like building a life, a plant that does not die, a walk to the marina, a loaf of bread that rises the way it's supposed to and makes the house smell like mercy. I checked my mail. I forwarded my address before I had an address to forward to because I knew I was not going back even if they told me I could. I stood in my living room with movers and pointed to furniture, and I did not cry because crying in front of people you're paying feels like giving them too much of you. I asked them to leave the pegboard in the garage because David's tools belonged to the wall even if they did not belong to me anymore. Caleb texted me the kind of photos men send when they don't want to spook a friendship. A dog he met at a job, the sunset from an empty parking lot, his coffee with a reflection of a crane in it. I sent him a picture of my new thermostat with the number glowing 68 and the caption, "Stubborn on purpose." He wrote back, "Good stubborn." Detectives asked me again if I had noticed anything else, and I told them about the time the smoke alarm chirped once and then stopped, and they wrote it down like it mattered. And maybe it did, maybe it didn't. And that was the lesson of all of this. Nobody knows which details will save you until they do. The trial did not look like television. It looked like people in shoes sitting in rows. It sounded like dry paper and throat clearing. The prosecutor was younger than I wanted him to be, but older than he looked, in that way that matters. He put the black box on a cart and let the jury look at it without touching it. He did not say how it worked. He said why it shouldn't have been there. He showed the photos of the trim where the nails had gone in and come out and gone in again. He asked Caleb when he had first learned to tell the difference between a factory line and a human one. Caleb said, "When you drop a wrench on a concrete floor enough times, you know how it lands." The jury nodded, all of them, like they'd dropped their share of wrenches. The defense said, "Innocent until proven guilty," out loud like a prayer, and then did the thing good defenders do. They told a different story that could also be true. Ethan had installed a smart relay for energy savings and forgot to document it. Paige kept notes because she was worried about my health. They had text messages where she'd sent me links to articles about indoor air quality. She'd indeed done that. You can hang a picture on any nail if you want the room to look different. The part that decided things, I think, was not the boxes or the wires or even the notes. It was the sentences in those notes that didn't sound like love. Not "Mom seemed tired today," but "subject lethargic after 3 p.m. cycle," like a science project. Not "we should take her to the doctor," but "wait until symptoms align with calendar plan," like a launch window. The prosecutor put those words on a screen without commentary. The courtroom stayed very, very quiet. On the second week, the prosecutor asked me if I wanted to read a statement. He said I didn't have to. He said it might help or it might not. He said it would be a choice I didn't owe anyone, including him. I said yes, because choices define us, and I needed to know I still had some. I stood and said that houses are made of wood and wishes, and that this one had held both. I said you can do everything right. Put the fire extinguisher under the sink, replace batteries in alarms, keep your ladder on the right rung, and still be undone by a person standing close enough to say your name. I said I had loved Ethan and Paige in the way you love people who belong to someone you love, and I had expected that love to be a kind of insurance. I said I had learned it is not. The defense didn't cross-examine me. The lawyer looked at his notes and then at his clients and then at his shoes. Ethan watched the wall where the outlet is, the place you look when you can't look at the people who put the outlet there. Paige looked at me for the first time in 2 weeks, her eyes filling and then draining, like a tide does when you're not watching it and then you are, and it won't stop because you noticed. The jury found them guilty of the things the prosecutor said they'd done. Not all of them, but enough that the air shifted. There was sentencing. There were numbers attached to years and years attached to names, and the sound of a gavel that tastes like metal if you've said that word out loud on the stand. After, in the hallway, Caleb stood with his hands in his jacket, like a kid outside a dance, who doesn't want to make eye contact. I walked up to him and said thank you, and he said stop, and I said no, because gratitude is a muscle, and if you don't work it, it atrophies, and you end up not being able to lift what you need to carry. I'm going to sell the house, I said, because he deserved to hear a future come out of my mouth. That makes sense, he said. You can make a life anywhere. I'm going to move near the marina, I said, closer to the gulls. They complain so loudly that my thoughts don't stand a chance. He laughed, this small, bright thing that made the hallway a little less like a hallway. Send me a picture when you find the new thermostat. I will, I said. I sold the house in June. The buyers were a couple in their 30s who had a toddler and a dog, and the toddler patted the walls like they were a pony, and the dog sat in the kitchen like he'd always sat in that kitchen. And I made myself small in the corner and did not say any of the things my mouth wanted to say about history and ghosts and the way the house makes certain noises when it rains. I signed papers in an office with too much glass. I handed over a key that had warmed in my palm every day for 15 years. I walked out carrying a folder and a pen and a sense that I had kept a promise to someone who was no longer there to hear it. My new place is smaller in the way that feels like tidying your life. 2 rooms and a balcony that looks sideways at boats. The thermostat here has 3 buttons and no pretend smile. 68 hums. In the morning, I drink coffee on a chair that folds and watch the gulls argue over a sandwich crust. On Tuesdays, I walk to the farmer's market and buy carrots so ugly they look brave. On Fridays, I volunteer at the library, and sometimes people return books late and apologize like they've failed me personally, and I tell them the truth, which is that a story kept you company for longer than you planned, and we should all be so lucky. Every once in a while, I dream the old house. In the dream, the thermostat is a nightlight, and the hallway is longer than it should be. In the dream, I'm always reaching for the chain on the library lamp, and it's always a little too short. And I wake sitting up with my hand in the air, pulling on nothing. Then I laugh because my brain is a theater kid, and I get up and make tea and stand on my balcony and let the water teach me about repetition without boredom. You'll want to ask, if you've listened this far, what I would say to Ethan and Paige if they were suddenly standing on this balcony in that place dreams are, asking for absolution, like it's a recipe I keep in a drawer. I don't know. Every day the answer moves. On some days, it is an old anger that wakes and demands exercise. On other days, it is a grief that sits on the edge of the bed and doesn't say anything, and I make it toast because I don't know what else to do. What I know is this: safety is not a house, and danger is not a person, and both of those sentences are true, even when they sound like fortune cookies. Safety is attention. Danger is indifference. The man in the orange vest told me not to touch the thermostat, and I listened because his voice had a timbre that belonged to people who mean to keep you. I stepped outside. I stepped into the new way my life would be. I called someone whose jacket didn't say family. I learned to call myself family too. I still make casseroles. I still keep an extinguisher under the sink and check the batteries on the smoke alarm on the first of the month. I still label my holiday boxes in a handwriting David would recognize. I still talk to the maple in front of the old house in my head when the wind is the right kind of wet. And it says back the kind of green things always say, which you can paraphrase as, grow or don't, I'm busy. My niece brings me groceries when she knows I'm lying about being fine. Caleb sends a picture sometimes from somewhere far east of the mountains where the sky is honest and it makes me believe in the weather again. I joined a community garden and learned that tomatoes are petty and zucchini are generous. And both of those traits are useful if you know them early in the relationship. I keep the new thermostat unsurprised. 68 clicks on and the room breathes and it is enough. The number glows and doesn't lie. When I pass it in the hall, sometimes my fingers itch the way a muscle burns before it is strong. I let the itch be. I don't touch the thermostat when I'm scared, not because someone told me not to, but because I know what to touch instead. The phone, the pen, the hand of a person who has shown you where they stand by standing there. If a small thing asks for your attention, an extra wire where there shouldn't be, a number that looks too polite, a mom used like a key instead of a name, this is your permission to look at it. Not with paranoia, with practice. The country is full of houses that do exactly what they're supposed to do, and people inside them who don't. It is also full of people who will stop on your porch and tell you to pick up your purse and step outside now, please. And those people deserve coffee, even if they never drink it. I know you want me to end this with forgiveness or a moral or both. There isn't one. There is instead a balcony with a folding chair and a gull yelling a joke. Only he gets. And the sound of someone on the floor above dropping a set of keys exactly at the same time every day like a clock. And a woman in a blue cardigan learning the names of the people at the farmer's market. Not because names make strangers smaller, like I said at the beginning, but because names let you set something heavy down without breaking it. A man once told me not to touch a thermostat. I touched a life instead, the one I still get to have. If you're listening in a kitchen with a number glowing on your wall, this is me reminding you. You can step outside. The door opens both ways. The map redraws around your feet as soon as you move. You are not a house. You are the person who decides where to live.